The number one running back in the 2023 cycle will be taking an official visit to Louisville. Here in a couple weeks, we will talk about that and more recruiting news on this episode of the show. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. For those who are not aware of who I am, I serve as a credentialed media member for Cardinal Sports Zone, also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports, and I want to say thank you personally for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. As I alluded to in the opener, it is going to be a heavy recruiting episode of the show. We will start out by discussing five-star 2023 running back Rueben Owens deciding to take an official visit to the Louisville Cardinals program on the weekend of June 17th. We will then transition into talking about a four-star running back in that class, Marquese Williams, cutting his list to 7. The Cardinals were included in that list cut. And then to wrap the show up, we will discuss high 3-star, low 4-star prospect Luke Burgess, the offensive lineman, recently cutting his list to 3 ACC schools. The Cardinals were included in that as well. But we'll start out discussing Rueben Owens, the number one overall running back in the 2023 cycle, 5-star prospect out of El Campo, Texas, 5'11", 190 pounds, has set a handful of visits. The Cardinals receiving one. This kind of came out of nowhere. I know that Louisville had been adding more and more prospects to this big June 17th official visit weekend where, you have guys like Pierce Clarkson, Aaron Williams, Jaleel McClain, some uncommitted prospects like DeAndre Moore Jr., Madden Sanker, the offensive lineman out of Georgia. But then around a week ago, there was word that, and it kind of came out of nowhere, that the number one overall running back in the class would be making the visit. And pretty recently, word came out that Rueben Owens' dad and Steve Clarkson, the father of Louisville quarterback commit Pierce Clarkson, had been in contact and were getting close. So I'm not saying that this is recruitment that the Cardinals are going to be favored in. In fact, I think, honestly, it's probably the exact opposite. Not saying that the Cardinals do not have a chance here, but with Steve Wiltfong, the national recruiting analyst for 24/7 Sports, logging in a recent crystal ball projection for Rueben Owens to Texas A&M, you see just how big of a battle, uphill battle, I should say, this is going to be for Scott Satterfield and company. But nonetheless, getting him on campus for a visit is absolutely huge. And if the Cardinals were able to pull off the unthinkable and get a commitment from the number one ranked running back, well, the offense would definitely reap the benefits. I want to read some of the scouting reports like I have for various recruits in the past. Gabe Brooks, the Midlands region recruiting analyst, compared him to TJ Yeldon, a current running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think he's a current running back. I haven't heard TJ Yeldon's name in quite some time, but very, very good at Alabama. There is a very, very, a long description that I want to basically read all of, because I think that it tells the story. Owns the requisite frame with an athletic build and room to add necessary mass. Looks and plays taller/longer than listing with open field. I think it says gait on the longer end of the spectrum that fosters speed building ability at the top end. Production jumped from freshman to sophomore year with obvious big play punch. Averaged over 10 yards per carry. Then again in his junior season with enormous production in counting stats and terrific per carry rate. Field speed is a plus and reflects in sophomore track times. Texas Class 4A state level contender in the long jump. Flashes impressive short area suddenness with agility to make defenders miss in the hole. Does not require much gear down when redirecting. Couples those traits with impressive burst and acceleration to reach top speed quickly, shows good contact balance at the second level, capable pass catcher with 7-on-7 reps as a receiver, though in-game opportunities catching the ball have been limited. Third down competency and blitz pickup and increased passing game reps can be developed. Vertical runner at times with a high center of gravity. Looked like one of the best 2023 running backs nationally early on and reinforced that in exceptional junior campaign. Projects as a difference-making high major back with long-term NFL early draft potential. As I mentioned, Rueben Owens, 5'11", 190 pounds, not only a star on the football field, but also in the track setting. Placed third as a sophomore last May in the Texas 4A state meet in the long jump, ran a 10.72 in just this past March, and long jumped 23 3/4 in April 2021. So a dual sport athlete. I wonder if he would be running track for wherever he commits. That'll be an interesting thing to look at, but I think that this doesn't really need to be explained. When you go back and watch his film, you find yourself kind of watching it over and over because some of these broken tackles, these missed tackles that he's got on film, simply put, it's incredible. Some of the best film that I've seen from a running back in quite some time. And it shows in the rankings, the number 1 overall ranked running back, a 5-star composite recruit. So, but you're going to have to go against the big boys in this one. Texas A&M is right there. Texas is there. Not only that, but Georgia is going to be getting an official visit down the line as he made it known that his decision probably wasn't going to come for a couple months or so. That decision's a little bit in the future. So it is what it is. But from a scheme and a fit standpoint, Rueben Owens would come to campus and probably be in starting contention here at Louisville. That's no disrespect to Jalen Mitchell, Tyon Evans, Travion Cooley, assuming that one of them would be, one or all of them, or two, or you get it. If any of them are on the roster, that's no disrespect to any of those guys. I think it's more of a testament to how good that Rueben Owens is. And I know that this recruiting class has had a couple of running backs kind of mentioned. You have Owens, we have Marquese Williams that we're about to talk about. There's also Javin Simpkins, a high 4-star ranked running back, and so on and so forth. But there is a chance after the season, you could see a guy like Jalen Mitchell or Tyon Evans, look to go to the professional level. Jalen Mitchell, maybe he feels like he doesn't have more to prove after a good season. Maybe Tyon Evans does the same thing. Travion Cooley will only be a true sophomore, so you would assume that he would be back for the next season. But ultimately, overall, it's going to be an uphill battle for the Louisville Cardinals. We know that. That should not surprise a single person. But get this, just the fact that they are getting this prospect on campus for an official visit, and I have to say, not only is it the fact that you're getting him on campus, but you are getting him on campus for what is likely to be possibly the biggest football recruiting weekend in the history of the University of Louisville football program. And I do not mean that in a hyperbolic sense. Yes, January you had a weekend when Pierce Clarkson committed right before the weekend, and you got multiple commitments throughout the next couple of days heading into the beginning of next week. But from a strictly a rating standpoint, you have DeAndre Moore, you have Madden Sanker, 2 top 100 prospects. Throw in Rueben Owens into the mix. You have the majority of the Louisville commits. Luke Burgess is going to be on campus, and who knows? It's June 17th. There still is an opportunity to add more guys on campus. Needless to say, Scott Satterfield and company will have their work cut out for them that weekend, but overall, getting them on campus is huge. That definitely applies for the number 1 ranked running back in the country in the 2023 recruiting cycle, Rueben Owens. Speaking of running backs, kind of going down the line, I want to take this time now to talk about 4-star running back Marquese Williams, who Louisville fans might not necessarily be as familiar with. He cut his list recently, and the Cardinals ended up making the cut. We will talk about the chances that Louisville could land him here in just a second after we talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, BetOnline. Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find all of the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline is where the game starts. Hey, Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. So as I mentioned, kind of going down the lines in terms of running backs, I think it's pretty clear that Scott Satterfield, Lance Taylor, and company are looking to add a high-caliber running back to this recruiting class. We talked about Rueben Owens. Javin Simpkins is another name, four-star running back that Louisville has been recruiting for quite some time. But Marquese Williams, the four-star running back out of Harris, Pennsylvania, attending Bishop McDevitt High School, 5'9", 185 pounds, recently cut his list to 7, and it seems like a lot of Louisville fans were probably a little surprised to see the Cardinals' name on the list. Lance Taylor from Notre Dame, the running backs coach that is now the co-offense coordinator here at Louisville, recruited, I think Keith Wynn. I always forget how to pronounce Keith's last name of a Card Chronicle. Shout out to him for pointing out this tidbit of information. And he basically said that, Lance Taylor recruited Williams at Notre Dame, and it seems like, that trend has continued over into Louisville. Notre Dame is included in that list, along with Louisville, Texas A&M, Iowa, Penn State, Minnesota, and Virginia Tech. I believe that Williams will be visiting Minnesota here soon in the next couple weeks. Let's see if I can find out any information on it seems like Minnesota is kind of the unsung leader in this respective recruitment. It'll be interesting to see when he decides to make his commitment. I think that the commitment timeline is going to be the big factor here. But for the Cardinals, I think that it's kind of the same storyline. It's the question of, can you get this recruit on campus for an official visit? If you do, you have a decent chance. So that will be what is to be focused on here. 5'9", 185 pounds, ranked the 337th best player in the recruiting class, the 24th best player at the position, and the 6th best in the state of Pennsylvania. Brian Doan, the national recruiting analyst of 24/7 Sports, back in August of 2020, projected him as a Power 5 starter. He had this to say about Marquese Williams: has the frame to play at 200 pounds as his body matures, patient runner with hip looseness, tough to arm tackle, has a feel for position, comfortable between the tackles and can get outside, does not dance, good vision with cutback ability, accelerates well, impressive stop-start, already shows speed to finish runs, understands how to set up downfield blocks, asset in the passing game, continued strength development throughout body will raise his level, produced at a high level, 100 or 1,100 yards and 15 touchdowns for a strong program. You have to assume that this was, early in his high school career. Multi-year starter at a high-level Power 5. So you're kind of in that same line of thinking, right, for Louisville. It's getting a player that could possibly come in next season and compete for starting snaps, or at least, heavy rotational snaps. I like what Brian said about, his ability to make guys miss and his ability to cut back with little to no effort. That's one thing that when I watched his huddle film, I kind of got the vibe with as well, is when you allow him to get to the second level, you've lost, because he's got that top-end speed to really make you pay. But I think he does a great job of making guys miss. I want to see what his yards per carry is like after the first line of contact, because I think that he does a great job of absorbing contact and staying on his feet. And I think that that's something that you really have to look into. So ultimately, it's an interesting situation, because you really don't know where he's leaning, and with a player that hasn't necessarily been mentioned a ton for Louisville in the past couple weeks, even past couple months. But it's pretty nice to be able to be kind of surprised and included in highly rated 4-star prospects list cuts. Now, whether or not he makes another list cut, I'm not sure if Louisville would make that. Like I said, a lot of it depends on what NIL package they could put together for him, because that is critical in today's age. But also, can you get Marquese Williams on a visit? That is another thing. But overall, this is another example that you're going to see Louisville recruit all across the country, right? Yes, we talk about the California aspect of things. Pierce Clarkson, DeAndre Moore, Aaron Williams, Jaleel McClain, Jamari Johnson. The list goes on and so forth. But you have Madden Sanker from Georgia. You have Kyle Parker and Jonte Cook from Texas. Javin Simpkins, who I think is from Florida. And Luke Burgess from Indiana, who we're going to talk about here in just a minute. And I think Khalil Ali is from New Jersey. And then New Jersey or Pennsylvania, one of the two. I always forget with some of these recruits. But now, Pennsylvania, where that state really produces some top-end talent year in, year out. I would love to see Louisville start to tap into the Ohio area, the Pennsylvania area when it comes to recruiting. And I'm interested to see that during his time at Notre Dame, what can Lance Taylor bring to the equation as within the Louisville football recruiting department of trying to develop a pipeline into the Midwest, into the Ohio Valley? What can that look like? Can Louisville contend for some of these players and be able to beat out the likes of an Iowa or a Penn State? That's going to be tough to beat. Minnesota, a lot of Big Ten flavor in this list cut. Texas A&M, you have to respect what they're doing, regardless if they're prioritizing a recruit or not, just considering what they spent in NIL money recently. Also, there's some other programs that you have to respect in this as well. So I think that at the end of the day, it's flattering that Louisville is included in this list. It shows that I think that Louisville's offense, the scheme fits and things like that really, really are favorable for running backs because it's a run-dominant offense. 3 guys are able to get significant carries. They've shown that throughout Scott Satterfield's tenure here at Louisville so far. And I think overall it's going to get even a little better. Not saying that, we want Malik Cunningham to leave, but when Malik does leave, you don't have when Pierce Clarkson comes in, Pierce can definitely run, but more of a pro-style pocket passer than Malik Cunningham is more of a dual threat. So, some of those carries may obviously from Malik might get turned into passing situations for Pierce, assuming that he's the next starting quarterback. But also, you have possible more possible handoffs and carries for the running back. So at the end of the day, is Louisville going to be heavily involved in this one? I think that they're going to try to. You would like to get at least one high caliber running back in this program for the 2023 recruiting cycle. But at the end of the day, I'm a little bit skeptical because you're trying to go into Big Ten country and get one of the state's best recruits in Pennsylvania. But overall, it's going to come down to can he get or will he visit the University of Louisville? I do believe that if they can get him on a visit, they could definitely get involved in this recruitment. But like I said, it's very, very new, and I don't necessarily know what that relationship is like with the University of Louisville coaching staff. You would have to assume that pre-existing relationship with Lance Taylor does mean a lot. But at Notre Dame, and now you have, Coach Marcus Freeman as the head coach, Tommy Rees as the offensive coordinator. What's that relationship like there? Who was the main recruiter for Marquese Williams at Notre Dame? There's so many questions that we need some answers to before we kind of assess how good the chances are here for Louisville. But we'll transition over into another 2023 recruit in offensive tackle Luke Burgess, who many Louisville fans are aware of. Cut his list to 3: North Carolina, Florida State, and of course, the Louisville Cardinals. If you are watching this live, obviously you won't hear or see, for that matter, the implemented advertisements that will be available on the audio version of this podcast. So if you're listening to this on the various streaming services, you obviously will hear some of these, advertisements. So stay tuned. But as always, I have to keep telling you all thank you, because I really, really am appreciative of all of the things that you all have done for this podcast, especially making us your first listen every single day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. High 3-star, low 4-star prospect who, for the record, I think is going to be a composite 4-star by the time signing day rolls around. Luke Burgess, 6'7.5", 285-pound offensive tackle from New Palestine, Indiana. Cut his list to 3 recently. All 3 teams will be going against each other from the conference. North Carolina, Florida State, and Louisville. Steve Wiltfong had an article about his list cut recently, and I want to read some of the quotes. Regarding Louisville, Burgess says, "I think Louisville has an amazing and genuine coaching staff. I can really see myself playing and being successful there, and I also love the city." New Palestine head coach Kyle Ralph said in that same article, "I think the biggest thing with him, he's just really worked hard to continue to develop himself. He knows he's still pretty raw at O-line play, and the amount of work he's put in to continue to learn and get better has been impressive to me." He goes on to say he's had great spring practicing and already looks like a different player than he was just last year. "I think he's going to take major steps forward this coming season. He has a great work ethic and a desire. He wants to be great. A lot of people like the attention. Luke likes the process and development towards being a great football player. Not to mention he's a mountain of a human being. Holy cow." And the last thing he says, obviously his frame, he's up to 292, 295 pounds. I think we measured him 6'7.5" to 6'7 3/4. He's minimum 6'7.5". With that size, he's gotten up to, like I said, 292, 295 right now. His frame is off the charts. What you see in his frame, his ability to move at that size, also is something that really pops. Just watching him on his tape and watching him right now in spring practice, his ability to move well at that size. His frame is going to be able to hold 330, no problem. He's going to be prototypical left tackle, right tackle if he has to. I could easily see him finishing out his college career at 6'7.5", 330, and look good. So great quotes from Coach Ralph over at New Palestine. Burgess currently is ranked as the 406th best prospect in the 2023 cycle, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, which, if you aren't aware, kind of meshes in all of the recruiting services like 24/7 Sports, Rivals, ESPN, all that together. He's ranked as the 31st. That's not even a word. 31st best offensive tackle and the 5th best prospect in the state of Indiana. He's going to be making a couple visits, all 3 visits here in the next couple weeks. I think next weekend he'll be at North Carolina and then Florida State, or you can flip-flop those 2. But it seems like Louisville gets the last last official visit of those 3. And when does that come? On that huge weekend of June 17th. So not only is it big for Rueben Owens, but having a possible commit here in Luke Burgess coming to town is huge as well. It seems like his commitment would be somewhat set for the near future after that. I'm not sure of an exact timeline, but at the end of the day, I love what I'm hearing from, New Palestine's head coach. I think that, like I said, at the end of the day, I think he's going to be a composite 4-star in the rankings once signing day rolls around. I love his size, 6'7", can get up to 330 pounds. Watching his film, has solid hands, solid footwork for his size, extremely agile for his size as well. Really, really reminds me, and this is kind of going to get some flack from Louisville fans, but really does remind me of the rise that we saw in Zen Mikulski, who committed to Louisville pretty early on in the 2021 recruiting cycle, but ultimately ended up flipping to Ohio State, or decommitting and then committing to Ohio State. I don't think you can necessarily consider it a true flip, but committed to Ohio State shortly after, rose up the recruiting rankings. I'm not saying that Burgess is going to have that same meteoric rise in the rankings, but I do think that, in terms of his skill development, he's raw, but he has the frame. He's got, the passion. He's got the work ethic, and he's got the tools to be a very, very successful offensive lineman. I think he's going to be able to come in and play, maybe not necessarily right away at the next level at any of the 3 programs he's going to go to, but with the frame, there's a lot of stuff to work with. So when you get to year 2, year 3, you're looking at a possible multiple year starter in the Power 5. In this instance, the ACC. I like where Louisville sits here. There's been a lot of good, good tidbits from various recruiting services that people have sent me that have basically said that, Louisville is sitting in a pretty spot for Luke Burgess's commitment. And, shout out to those guys for grinding and getting that information. I won't act like that's my information, but I wish I could properly credit it to someone, but I forget who the names were. But regardless, a huge prospect, literally. But also in terms of the Flyville 23 class, getting the offensive line bolstered for Pierce Clarkson once he comes into Louisville. There's a lot of spots that are going to be filled on this offensive line. Obviously not Michael Gonzalez. He might be playing left tackle, but Caleb Chandler is going to be, probably moving on at the end of the season. So, like I said, it's a huge possibility for Louisville to get Luke Burgess, but it's going to depend on how that official visit goes. It's very beneficial and encouraging that they get the last of the three, but obviously he has to take that, and you do have the risk of possibly him canceling some official visits if he feels comfortable committing to North Carolina or Florida State after those respective visits. But in terms of the show, that's going to wrap up this kind of late week edition of the show. Before we get out of here, I want to give a shout out to the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, hosted by Rafael Barlow, Richard Stamen, Sam Ferris, and Leif Thulin. It gives fans an in-depth look into the biggest prospects, the latest player rankings, and of course, big boards. Follow Locked On NBA Draft Big Board every day on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. But that's going to wrap up this special edition of the show. Everyone have a great day, and we will see you right back here really soon.